Hi, I'm Mrs. Day, and this is a mock lesson that I plan on giving tomorrow. So the lesson is going over the standard 7.rp.2a, and which is comparing two quantities to see if they're in a proportional relationship, and 7.rp.2b, which is to check the constant proportionality. So when my lessons start, the kids come in and they have 5 minutes to do the do now. Their do now is usually either a problem from yesterday's material, or it's going to be something that maybe they didn't do so well on collectively in the past. It could even be on a completely different standard. In this case, it's about it's the same standard in ratios and proportions. So it kind of goes along, it's gearing them up to what they're going to need to do today. So after 5 minutes, I stop the clock, and then I would usually start out asking students, okay, so how would we solve this? And hopefully by now they all, or at least a couple of them should say, let's go find out what the important things are out of the problem. So I would use my cold call sticks, and I just have tongue pressers, popsicle sticks with their names on it, and ask them to tell me what I should underline that would be the important information in the problem. So hopefully they would have me underline that it's 12 muffins, and it uses 2 cups of milk for every 12 muffins. Hopefully they'll say that 96 muffins every day is going to be important. And then I would ask them, what is the question? And we always do that in different colors so it kind of stands out. In this case, we want to know how many total gallons of milk. And I'm hoping that they catch that it's for 1 week. Now, if they don't point it out to me, I'm not going to say anything about it until we get a little bit further into the problem. So when we go back to review whether or not we had gotten the right answer, if they haven't pointed that out yet, then we'll talk about that then. So at this point, I would ask them, during the do now, I would be going around and kind of looking at what they were doing. So I would be looking for things like, how did they solve it? Did they set up a table? Did they try to write an equation? And then I would ask the person who maybe had a table that was set up, and then say, I saw so-and-so had a really good idea. Let's go over it up here. And maybe they'll tell me that they need a table for it, that in their table they had milk, and then they also had muffins. So they don't get confused, we'll put another variable there for B for a batch of 12. So 2 cups of milk, hopefully they'll tell me that's going to make 12 muffins. And then I would ask, so what's your next entry? What do we do next? Try to lead them or drag, pull out of them that we need to keep a ratio table, and I'll make sure they use the words ratio table as well. That's part of our vocabulary. That they need to make sure that their entries in the ratio table are in the right spot. So if they tell me we want to know 96 muffins, I'm going to ask them, of course, where does this go? Hopefully they'll tell me that. And then I'll ask them, okay, what do we do after that? How then do we come up with this piece right here? And if we have some people who can do it, I'll ask them to give me their answers. Hopefully they'll tell me something like times 8 times 8, and then that's going to be 16. So at that point, I'm going to ask them, is that it? So how we found the answer is 16 the answer. And I'm going to give him maybe about 45 seconds to talk at their tables. I set a timer up there. There's a timer within the flip chart here that I can set. So I'll set a timer and I'll say, discuss at your tables. Is 16 really the right answer, or is there anything else in the question? If students are struggling, I might have them look and go back to the question. I might invite them to come up here to the board. I'll get a little closer to it. See if you notice anything that we haven't underlined that might be important. So hopefully they come up with, that this is, we want to know for 1 week, and that they point out that this is for every day. So at that point, I'll have them, okay, at your table, talk about then how we're going to figure this out for 1 week if we know that we need 16 gallons of milk for 1 day, and then hopefully they'll get to the, multiply by 7 point on that, and we'll come up with the correct answer. At this point, I might also add, well, how many muffins do I make in a week? So hopefully they'll also follow with, all right, so that's also going to be a times 7. Then I'm going to ask, are these numbers proportional? And we might have a discussion about that so we can get into the next piece. So the next thing I do during the day is kind of introduce what we're doing. We talk about the goal, and the what. This is an I can statement, and that's based on taken directly from the standard. I don't normally use the ones that they found on the internet. I try to make it as simple as possible. So in this one are 2 things that we need to do today. I can find if 2 quantities are proportional, and number 2, I can find the constant proportionality. We're going to do a multiple representations activity that's going to be in a round robin format. Why do we do it? And we'll talk about, why is it important to learn ratios and proportions. One of the things that we've discussed is trying to get the best deal. If you're going shopping and let's say you want to spend the least amount of money possible, is it better to go to Costco or is it better to go to Safeway or Whole Foods? So to get them thinking about, this is stuff that you're probably going to use in your everyday life. I go over the agenda. I'll talk about, we'll do the multiple representations activity. We've already done the do now, and then we'll do a show what you know at the end. So they know that we are going to have a little small quiz, like an exit ticket at the end. The important part is I also bring up the vocabulary, and I'll say, okay, we know the constant proportionality, or we'll talk about the constant proportionality. What is proportional? We already talked about that a little bit in the do now. How can we tell if it's proportional? Ordered pairs, and we'll see later on when we do some graphing, we'll talk about some ordered pairs. And then the rate of change. So at this point, I have this sort of a review which will tie into the skills that they need to be successful in the multiple representations activity. I took the one that I thought was the one they still kind of are not 100% solid on. In this case, table shows the relationship between the depth in meters of a submarine and the time in minutes as it started to dive. Is the relationship proportional? So I'll have them discuss for maybe 35 seconds, say, how am I going to tell if this is proportional? And I'll check in with each one of the groups as I'm going around, just kind of listen to see what they're thinking, or are they totally lost? If they're totally lost, I will probably tell them to go check their interactive notebook. I used to have them do their own interactive notebooks, but then like half the class would either forget them at home or lose them or their dog ate them or something like that. So I decided instead now they take notes digitally so they can go back into the Google Drive. They actually do it through Schoology as an assignment for classwork. And then I take the highlights of those notes and I put them in here into a binder. So this covers a whole set, everything from the order of operations all the way to what we're doing now, which is probability. So I will tell them, hey, have you checked your interactive notebook? And then they know to grab that. Some of them are really good about advocating for themselves. They'll actually just grab the interactive notebook, say, misses or anything, is it in here? What page? I might also come up to the board, and again, this is just a really quick talk, but I might come up to the board and just quickly write what the page number is, interactive notebook, page, whatever, say, hey, have you looked at the board? You know, you might want to check for the page number up there. Anyway, after they have a little bit of time to talk about it, we'll discuss, you know, what makes something proportional. So they know or should remember that the constant proportionality between the ordered pairs needs to be the same. So I'll make sure that I'm eliciting that particular vocabulary from them. And then on the next slide, once they've gotten to that point, I'll have them calculate the constant of proportionality. I'll tell them, you know, utilize your groups. You do the first order pair, you do the second order pair, you do the third order pair. You know, you don't have to do these by yourself. They're allowed to use their calculators, and I'll give them, you know, a minute 10 to work on that. So with my cold call sticks, then I'll tell them, before I do the cold call, I'll tell them, all right, share your answers with the group. You have about 35 seconds. Make sure, you know, everybody's on the same page. And then I'll do the cold call. This way, if one person was doing, say, you know, the 6 and 260 ordered pair, but I called them on this one, they know who to go to for that answer. So, and then we'll fill in the constant proportionality for all of these things. One of the things I like for them to do, and they really enjoy, is they usually do their work on the table, or I have them do it digitally. So they'll be doing it online. So for the do nows, and usually days like today where they're going to have a handout and it's an activity, I usually just have them do their math right on the table. After that, I'm going to introduce the activity, the multiple representations. I'll tell them that, you know, we're working on creating story problems, tables, graphs, and equations, that each one of them is going to be creating a story problem. They're going to be doing it on their own. Each person will create a story problem, but they're going to be collaborating together as a group. So if anyone is stuck, you know, access the other members of your group, access your interactive notebook. I'll hand out the graphic organizer, which I'll send along to you as well so you can see that. The graphic organizer just has 4 quadrants on it, and it says, you know, story problem, table graph, and equation. So the first round, for some background information, they have what has to be included in a story problem that has to do with ratios and proportions. So they need some sort of starting number. They need to know how much it's changing by. I'm going to ask them, what do we call that? You know, and get them to say that's going to be the rate of change, or the rate of change, or the constant proportionality. So we'll tie that in. And then their problem has to have a question with it. I gave an example here. Sarah texts 35 words in 3 minutes. How many words per minute does she text? I'm going to stress that they don't have to answer the problem. They just got to write a problem on that. So I'll give them a couple minutes to work on that. As I'm going around and just sort of checking in, one of the things I'm going to do is put this on the board. This is my support for some of my students that are more struggling, so at a little bit of a more challenging level. For my guys who are struggling, this is simply a list of the different tasks or the different things that the person can be doing in their story problem. And then this is the different rates that they might be asking for. I also add a sentence stem up here. Name text 34 words, which is one of the ones that are on here, words in 3 minutes. How many words per minute? And per minute is up here somewhere. Oh, right there. Per minute does blank text. So this way my kids that are really at a loss, or the ones that are still, you know, that need the extra support, can look up here and still be successful in this, you know, still get the right idea. So as I'm coming around, you know, if I see someone not, you know, not participating, not knowing what to do, I'm not going to point this out to the entire class. I'm just going to go up to that person and say, hey, you know, did you check out the board? You know, there might be something to help you up there. and I might have them go up and look at it and, direct them towards the example that's up there so they can see that. Let's see. Round 2 is going to be create an equation. So I'm going to have them shift to the next table. They're going to leave their story problems at that table, and they're going to move to the other table over there. At that point, they're going to look at the story problems that other people did, and then they need to create an equation that goes along with that story problem. So the first thing they need to do is make sure that the story problem is showing a proportional relationship, meaning it has like a rate of change, and it has some sort of starting point and maybe an ending point. And then they're going to create that equation. Again, if they're struggling, I might come around and just throw the page number from the interactive notebook up on the board, and then as I'm coming around, if someone's not sure, hey, you might want to check the board. Your interactive notebook might be a good choice. If they haven't grabbed that and started looking already, a lot of times they have it already, and they might just need help with which page that's on. Next thing we're going to be doing is creating a table. So again, they're going to rotate to a different group. They're going to leave the work that's there. And now they're going to be having to look at that group's story problem and look at that group's equation. And they have to double check that it jives, that it's the same proportional relationship, that there has been any mistakes there. Once they've done that, then they're going to create the table for that problem. They're going to, just like in the previous one, if they need help, I put the page for the interactive notebook up there. The main focus of this is that they're comparing, so they're comparing all those different representations of the problem, but they'll also need at the end to come up with constant proportionality. And when they're writing the equation, of course, they're also coming up with constant proportionality. So that's how it's going to be tying into those standards. The last one is going to be the graph. So they're going to rotate to the fourth table, and then they're going to take all those different representations, the story problem, the table, and the equation, and then they're going to create a graph out of it. I want them to make a choice of how they want to create that graph. I'm not going to steer them towards use the table or use the equation. I'm just going to say, let them discover, what's the best way to create that graph. We'll make sure that we're using words like ordered pair, make sure that they're utilizing the table, make sure that they're utilizing the constant proportionality. After they have gotten this far, their very fifth round is they're going to be returning to their own tables. At this point, they can see what the other groups have done to their story problem that they wrote originally in round 1. Their biggest priority and their biggest motivation is to check to make sure that those people who are sitting there got the right answer, and check and correct it if they haven't. The motivation being that they're going to be graded on their story problem and the other representation, so it's kind of like a collaborative effort. So it really behooves them to go back and double check that work and make sure that it's 100% correct, because that is going to be their grade. It's going to be their story problem. But then 3 other people have had their hands on it, so they want to make sure that's correct. The last thing that they'll need to do is need to go to each one of those representations, and they're going to need to highlight the constant proportionality. For the equation, that's going to be pretty easy. For the table, it may or may not be. For the graph, it may or may not be. So again, I'm going to steer them towards the interactive notebook so they can see that, all right, in the table, if you don't have x is equal to 1, if you don't have your independent variable equal to 1, you're going to have to find that to find the constant proportionality. Same thing with the graph. If you have not graphed where x is equal to 1, or your independent variable is equal to 1, then you're going to need that in order to find the constant proportionality. So that's going to be it for that. They're going to be sharing their findings for a minute. They'll work collaboratively if they need to in order to make sure that their papers are correct. They can consult with the other people at their group. And then at the end of the period, I give an exit ticket, which is a SWIC, show what you know. And this directly ties into what they've been doing in the class period. So they have a graph, they have a table, they have an equation and a story problem. But in this, they have to compare them, and they're not necessarily looking to see if they are proportional or not. Here we're focusing on that constant proportionality and seeing what is the better deal for that. That's pretty much it for the day, or for the class period. So thank you very much for allowing me to do it like this, and I will send along those materials. Thank you.